Hi, my name is Dave Reski, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths of marketing and leadership with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Jenn Foster. She's the founder and CEO of Foster Marketing, where she serves as a fractional CMO, a growth driver. She specializes in helping businesses scale through strategic marketing, brand building, and innovative growth initiatives. Jenn, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you for the introduction and thanks for having me.
You've done
Um,
so much. So you've been doing this for 20 years. You worked for large agencies as well as brands. Which do you prefer?
I feel like I've hit this spot where I specialize in this growth marketing, brand strategy, and digital engagement realm. And a lot of the work that I'm doing focuses on helping franchise systems and emerging businesses build sort of consistent and engaging brand identities in market. So that in totality is really what the crux of what I do. And then, just we had a nice conversation a few weeks ago about one of my key tools that I use and create for the brands that I've been working with, and that's a social playbook. This is something where I find most useful in this franchise system world and even in emerging business world, having sort of a clear framework for staying consistent in social. And again, with that sort of franchisee model and having multiple locations, allowing for that local engagement that they desperately need to build business. So it's really valuable for businesses with multiple people or teams posting to social media for one brand.
Yeah. So let's talk more about this idea of the social playbook. What is the social playbook? What is that? What is the concept really all about?
Yeah, I started creating them a few years ago for clients because what I found was either in this multi-location environment, there needed to be flexibility for the locality of what social is and engaging with the community, right? Where you are, but also for emerging businesses or just even 501c type of businesses where multiple people are touching those social channels and they needed guardrails and support and just the how to's and why to. And so it's not just a content calendar, it's more of a guide that outlines the brand voice, the visual identity, the messaging, the engagement strategies. It's really for franchise systems, critically because their location might have different people managing their social. And without that sort of playbook, you have this super inconsistent messaging or visuals that absolutely confuse the audience. And honestly, when you join a franchise, what you are joining is something that has this, foundational brand presence. And you don't want to corrupt that goodness of what you bought into. So it's really just kind of helping them navigate that, but it's that document that gets them through all of that. It keeps that brand identity intact, but gives those franchisees or multiple team members the freedom to connect with their audiences in a meaningful local way as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like when you have that and you have multiple people in multiple locations through these networks, posting and putting out good content, you get a lot bigger impact than if you just had one post and one account getting out there. So that you probably get like but huge leverage. But without the social playbook, you probably get chaos, right? You get like probably inconsistency. And I can
Yeah, I
imagine that
mean,
kind of falling apart like very quickly. You'll
yeah.
get like somebody posting birthday stuff and somebody else is posting just product stuff, and it's got to be crazy. So
Yeah, it can
yeah,
be a hot mess. And I think
yeah.
like with anything, social and any kind of marketing effort that we build out from a strategy perspective, I've always said since the dawn of time, consistency is key because that's what's going to build trust and recall, right? So, like having that tried and true voice, visual representation of the brand, when customers sort of or prospects see that same tone, messaging, and visual across multiple touch points, they're going to recognize and start to trust that brand. They're going to, whether they're interacting at a location in Boston or LA, right? And so this is particularly important because, especially in a franchise perspective, where you're sort of buying into a small business, even though it's a national brand, having that ability to know what to say from an overarching standpoint that's within those brand guardrails that's going to continue building your brand, but then also being able to talk about the local beach cleanup and be part of that community is only going to enhance that brand and community loyalty. So like we use this playbook and it can have multiple facets, but we will do them pretty custom. Um, we'll talk about different audiences, where they are, what they should be hearing, what they're going to engage with best. It's like the older segments are on Facebook. What are we doing there? And how are we showing up there? What are we saying there? There's a millennial audience that's like Instagram and TikTok, and what are we saying there? And so it's just kind of like really walking them through how to pull their audience in and have engaging and meaningful conversation to really help not only nurture leads, but also to nurture customers and like get that sort of like continued value out of their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I can really see the value of the social playbook across like a large franchisee system where you've got, dozens or hundreds of even accounts. But can the same concept work for like maybe a large manufacturer or a tech company or a finance company where they've just got one or a small set of social media accounts and maybe a small group of people who are posting and engaging on social media?
Yeah, I think that it is absolutely valuable for anybody. The the thought process with the way that we do this is that if you don't have a marketing department or your marketing department is sparse, like one of those companies, this is really helpful for that tool that guides there. Like if you're Fidelity, for example, you have a team doing all of this. Like foster marketing probably you don't need foster marketing services to tell you how to run your social. Like you have people in there. So what I find is usually it's those teams that are lean in marketing and don't necessarily have all the skill sets covered, and really need to be guided in that way or need that support or want that level of support for their junior staff that's actually going to do the execution. But it's most valuable, I've found, with franchise, multi-location, and so forth, because there are so many facets of, we'll talk about if they're in the southern region and seasonality is important to this product set, and like if it's a home services and um it's this. So we find it most helpful there so far. That's what I found, is that those types of companies value and use this and get the most out of it.
Yeah, and it seems like you've got to be very thoughtful about the regions and the localities and the product and how it works, and then the issues that are happening in every area. So it takes a lot of thought to put one of these together. You've been doing social media for a long time, and I mean, we've been, as an industry, we've been doing for over 15 years now. What are some of the big changes you've seen, and how is it different these days than it was, in 2009, 2007, when we were just starting out in this crazy journey of social media?
Um, Gosh, 2009, Jesus, it's been that long. I think the relevance of platforms continues to shift, and it is much harder to cut through the clutter of these platforms. We definitely include a paid strategy alongside an organic strategy for our playbooks, because you do sort of need this partnership between both. You need to have the organic strategy for that cohesive brand experience and consistency, and making sure that like you're maximizing your consumer journey and customer journey and just engaging with them consistently. But then I think the paid component is there to get that reach and draw in leads and so forth. So we do both, and I think that that's a big change from maybe 5+ years ago, where you could still play in the organic minefield and show up, and Facebook and Meta in general has just really changed that. It's definitely more of a pay to play
Mhm.
with brands. I think that's one thing that's changed our strategy and updated our playbook alongside it. So like we've evolved our playbook to include that, and showing them exactly like how to target inside those platforms and so forth as part of that playbook tutorial. And then influencers is another piece of it that continues to evolve, and how to help the businesses we work with understand how to navigate that, whether they should be outsourcing it, whether they can, take it on themselves, who they should be using, why, what kind of strategies they should be using so that they see if they're getting results from it. And so that's also a part of that social playbook that sort of like there's a lot of like modules that we can kind of like tack on depending on the business and depending on how deep they want to get in to the first engagement
Yeah.
of social. I think the last thing that's really just rocked this whole arena is AI, obviously. And I think just the impetus of creating consistent copy, content, and so forth, and having that component where it's done faster and there's more content than ever that you can create just because you can do it a little bit faster. I don't necessarily think that, and I'm probably saying this because I'm a creative, but I don't think that you can replace the branded human element of how we create, that social authentic brand and speak. But I do think that AI has allowed for way more ideas, thought starters, and just getting sort of that drafted content in a place where you can then layer in sort of the creative angle or the branded angle.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot. That's a lot there. Let's tackle each of those because I do want to talk about AI and more of your thoughts there. Love to engage more on influencers, and then the paid side is fascinating. But let's maybe do this in the reverse order of what you talked about and continue talking about AI. So, do you see with AI that brands and organizations are putting out more content than they ever have before? Is it a, kind of a doubling of the amount of content, whereas in the past they would post on Monday and Friday, and now they're doing it every day? Or are they just posting multiple times a day? What do you see as the the frequency and
It's sort of, I mean, the frequency is definitely up, right? And I think that I don't personally know the exact data. I'm sure like a Sprout Social or a HubSpot has some kind of stat from 2023 when we all started feeling the wave. Um, I would say from a personal perspective, it has definitely 2 or 3 times more content. Now, whether or not that content is meaningful remains to be seen, like whether or not we feel like people are engaging more with that content. Um, you know, I definitely am still sort of riding the line on using AI as a tool and not a replacement, and still continuing with a customer experience, like a journey that's appropriate and not necessarily just throwing AI out there for the sake of having content thrown at people. So many people opt out of emails because of that reason. So many people stop following brands because they're annoying. So you still need to ride that line. But again, it absolutely helps with those kernels of ideas. Like if I wanted to, for example, if I wanted to run an event and I wanted to do some kind of social blitz pre and post, during, what have you, I would start in AI and say, like, write me an outline for a pre, during, and post social blitz. And that would give me sort of like, here are the things you should do. Here are the posts that you could do. And then I would take that and allow that to inform from a foundational perspective all the posts that I would do pre and post. So I
So
think it can be interesting in that way.
yeah, so it helps you with your planning, helps you with
Sure.
you have to have the strategy, right? You have to, and then it helps you with the planning. And then does it help you then create the content, kind of a more content? Um,
Sure.
yeah,
Say create 3 posts that invite um, invite people going to this event to our booth or whatever ever it is, and it will do that for you. And it's only, I mean, the reality is like, at least the AI that I've been leveraging is as good as your prompts. And I feel like everyone's saying that, but it's true. It's like my personal AI platform that I use and have been using in my instance now has my voice. It now is informed by, like, my resume is in there, drawing from, like, pretend that you're Jenn, a CMO. How would she write? So it's completely informed by what prompts and what content you've populated in there, and starts to draw from that as well from the web. Like if you wanted to figure out what are the 10 best events to go to if I'm this brand in this country and my audience is X, it'll pull that in for you instead of like spending God knows how many hours I used to spend as a junior executive fishing for the reasons and the wheres and the whys to these events. Like it kind of just starts that process. And then I still have to go into those websites and check them out and make sure they're right. And I still have to make sure it's a good lineup. And I still have to make sure it's, you know, economically feasible for the brand to even be a participant at it. Like all of those things still need to happen. But there's certain administrative functions of AI that's better than Google, right? Because Google's not going to pull a 10 list. Like Google's going to pull a article that somebody from that 10 list wrote and they wanted to be part of.
right. So
That's what they know.
it seems like what you're saying is like as an expert, you have the insight to create the prompts that are thoughtful and meaningful, and it's leveraging your experience and everything else that you've written with there.
Yeah.
And when you get something back, if it's good or not, you can iterate it. So as an expert, it lets you work more efficiently, more strategically, more quickly, and create more product because you really have this body of knowledge of what's going on, and then
Yeah,
you
and
can
I
create
think
with
that's a
it.
good point, David. Like it allows you to be more strategic
Mhm.
as a person that started a business almost 10 years ago. Like I was like the fractional CMO, the admin, the this, that. And I've got a team where I've got junior people working for me now, but it's still sort of like we kid around and we say like ChatGPT is the best employee of the month again this month, like because it does all of the stuff that takes a lot of time and has very little value behind it until you layer on that strategy.
Yeah. And that makes it really powerful. What about in other non-written forms? Are you seeing it start to help you in developing graphics and creating video, or have you played with any of that? Played
I
with
really
that
haven't
form?
played a lot with that personally. I think that the designers and videographers that I use in my network probably have, but I don't really have any good experience with that on my own.
Interesting. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the second point that you made about the change, and that is on influencers. What's the role of influencers today for brands? How should they be thinking about influencers in social media? Is it a necessary part of every campaign, just like, paid advertising, or can they ignore it? Do they ignore it at their peril? Or is there huge leverage opportunities? How do you think about using influencers?
Um, I think that there is this foundational PR underpinning of influencers, and that the function of PR in itself has just changed dramatically because of social and because of influencers. Um, I think that it makes sense when you are building trustworthiness or coming out with a new product that needs to be demonstrated. There's a lot of like really strong use cases for implementing an influencer. Where it gets yay or nay is there the right person
Mm,
to do it for you in your area that your audience is participating in? And quite frankly, like that for the low thing on the like we're not asking Kim Kardashian to talk about her pet food that gets delivered to her house, or maybe we are, but like we're looking for like a very specific person that can do the community level and the very laser targeted level testimonial.
mhm.
And so I think where it makes sense, yes, I'm always like influencer. So I recently worked with a brand that was just a local restaurant owner. He had his family always owned like the big chains like Burton's and um Outback and that kind of stuff. And when they sold those restaurants, they kept this one brand in-house because it was kind of like just this little guy hanging out, not underneath this franchise umbrella. And he took that and he opened a second location, but like with a little bit more of like a quick serve angle to it and just like, straight kind of like quick serve type of food. And in that situation, you are looking for people that are in that town, go to that restaurant. And so, yeah, those influencers were like micro influencers, not macro. Like, oh God, even what's more micro than micro? It's just crazy how we were so focused on who to ask and what to ask for.
Mm.
Um, whereas if it's a local politician or just um, a local public figure, we can kind of tap that person for home services that might be of value to that specific area.
Mm. It
So
seems like it seems like it takes so my firm, we do a lot of digital advertising management, right? So with Google or platforms like that. And that takes a lot of technical ability and keywords and thought about landing pages. But it seems like in influencers, it takes a lot of more strategic thinking in terms of like exactly who to go for, what to ask, what the offer is, what the compensation is, how to measure it. It seems like it takes a lot of thought, and it feels like there's a lot of trial and error, at least from an outsider's perspective? What's the magic in being able to get it? I can imagine if I was going to do it for me, for our firm, perhaps I could spend a lot of money and get nothing because I don't really know how to do it right. So what's the if you had to boil it down to one or two principles or three or four principles, like how do you get to a point where you can engage influencers properly to have a business impact that's positive?
Start small and target
Mm-hmm.
and track it.
Mm-hmm. So get out there, start
I
small,
don't,
do
I
some
don't
test
do
campaigns.
anything like I don't go big, like don't go crazy. It's like a do a small test, like take this one or two influencers to do one or two posts, track those posts with either a promo code or a link or whatever it is, right? And reflect back on that. And if there are, like a one-off post never going to work, right? But like if there are sort of KPIs and measures, like how many people engaged with the post, even if they didn't click through, how many people came into the store and used the promo code, um, stuff like that. Like then you can kind of start to make decisions on whether you go to the next step and build off of that, or whether you abandon that group and move over to this one. The I think the biggest mistake people make is they feel like they need to go all in.
Mm.
And I'm more of like that test and learn school of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually works best in digital advertising in general.
Right.
Anyway, I always talk about that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense in with influencers. You just have a lot more options and a lot more ways to go wrong if you do it badly. But if you do it thoughtfully, it sounds like you've had success in being thoughtful and strategic and targeted and making it work with those small bets and then scaling that up. We just have a few minutes left, and I don't want to miss this third area, which is paid boosted posts. How do you think about paid in terms of your strategy on social these days? Is it a critical part, optional? Do you do it
I
for
think it's critical. I
awareness,
think it's critical to
engagement?
do it in at least like certain times of the year when it makes sense, or when you're trying to do sort of like a whole scale boosting for some reason, like, and you've got other marketing things going on, like it's definitely a component that needs to be touched on. We did something similar for our client Pet Wants, which is a pet food franchise with over 100 locations. We partnered with them like literally a month before the pandemic hit. And then the pandemic hit, and we needed to shift their model, their marketing model, from what was a in-person events model in like farmers markets and so forth to a digital first approach. And we had to create this custom social playbook that aligned with organic content across all the locations. And then we had to also integrate paid strategies for that local targeting from a social perspective. And so the playbook helped each location stay super consistent, but still allowed that reach and so forth. And when we had that in place, it was the only thing in place during the pandemic. They actually saw a 25% increase in revenue that year. So like
Wow.
it was just a great example of how that tailored social strategy can drive real business results. And like that framework they needed to maintain that brand consistency across all those locations while still allowing each franchisee to connect with their local customers in that meaningful way. And from an ad perspective too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you think of it, the goals behind those campaigns, do you think of it for awareness, engagement, purchase? How do you kind of think of, the goals in general for your clients for social paid campaigns?
It really depends on where they are in their brand awareness funnel in specific areas of the region. Like sometimes if it's a brand new brand, or they're like just a emerging business, it's about awareness, right? We're not going to get conversions yet. Like that's just not a reality. Like we've got to get a lion's share of eyeballs on who you are first and build that, credibility and trust. Um, can we then move over to a lead generation campaign? Absolutely. Like without question. It's just do we have a lion's share of audience that we can build another lookalike audience off of? Do we have enough there to then say, and is there an offer we can put in front of them that we know is going to be worthwhile?
Hmm. Yeah. And that is the key, right? Is there an offer that's going to
Yeah,
work
yeah,
and requires strategic thought and testing on its own, right? So,
yeah.
well, that's great. Well, Jen, this has been a powerful conversation about social playbooks. Thank you very much for taking the time to share that with
For
our
having
audience.
me.
You've seen a lot of changes through the years, and you're clearly an expert in making this happen for your clients. If somebody wants to get in touch with you, learn more about your services, what's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, they can visit jenfostermarketing.com and they can learn more about tailored social playbooks or other marketing solutions.
That's great. Well, we'll also put the link in the podcast.
Thank
So
you.
thanks again for taking the time to talk to us today.
I appreciate it.